Good morning. I'm Frank Kaufmann, the president of the Settlement Project. I'm doing a piece this morning entitled Truth, Communication, and the Social Contract. We've entered into a period of transition in which tyranny has embedded itself primarily in non-government actors. Yes, there is tyranny at the hands of government actors indeed. We think most primarily of the CCP, its control over information that its citizens is censored from its citizens, and the human rights abuses that obtain there are forbidden to be reported on or communicated. But here in the United States, this same form of tyranny, oppression, and control of the population has moved away from government. The U.S. has so far not yet had a tyrannical government, but the mission or commission to forbid the free communication among citizens under danger of penalty has taken root in the United States, not through the forces of government, but rather through the forces of media and communications. It's a very interesting transition, which I hope our listeners will pay close attention to, and I hope leaders will begin to orient themselves in the classic ways of protecting and preserving freedoms, will recognize that the enemy of freedom in the United States is embedded in media, especially corporate media or China-controlled media or China-beholden media, and big tech, which is also, due to economic avarice, China-beholden. So, so here in the United States, there's been a steady stream of extremely important information that has been not only kept from the American public through blackouts, but forbidden to be communicated among members of the American public on platforms that enjoy the protections of American rights in the public square. And so these platforms, of course, are Facebook, Google, and Twitter, all of which have taken it upon themselves to decide what Americans may know and may hear, may become aware of. They've decided to become the censors, and even what Americans may communicate among themselves, as they have become, while enjoying Section 230 privileges, which presently there's rumblings to have them removed, and I personally believe that that couldn't happen fast enough. I wish Section 230 protections over platforms like Google, like Facebook and Twitter would be removed and dissolved immediately. And I wish that there would be hundreds of millions of lawsuits immediately leveled against the billionaires, these young kind of billionaires that imagine that they're in charge of what Americans should and can know. So censorship, deplatforming, defunding, and so on is heinous and is a violent aggression against the rights that Americans are meant to enjoy. And while people are benefiting and becoming billionaires from the freedoms they enjoy in this country, they've taken it upon themselves to act like the tyrants of history through censorship, blackouts, and the type of arrogance in which they decide what should and can be communicated. That's a serious problem. Given that those responsible for digging out matters of importance and communicating matters of importance have decided to deliberately fail at that responsibility and instead impose their will, their opinions, their political biases, and their ideologies on the public. What has happened as a result is that the American people have begun to seek to assemble for ourselves an alternate source of information, media, and communications platforms. And it's in this transition for a thinking and freedom-loving American that all of us are facing presently that I want to speak very briefly. Um, so here we are. We've met a new tyrant, not government, but uh, supposedly or quote unquote free enterprise corporations, not government, but corporations. And this includes big tech, and this includes China Alliance media like ABC, NBC, CBS, mainstream media that will withhold good information with for example, Trump's for peace negotiations in the Middle East, unprecedented, uncommunicated, withheld from the American people by mainstream media, and on the other hand, uh, um, documented criminal activity by a presidential candidate and at least members of his family, uh, blocked, withheld, and censored from the American people. So then people who are interested in both truth and free speech are left with the very difficult or novel position of having to search out and seek and assemble an altogether alternative source of information and source of communication. And this is a big challenge. It's kind of a Wild West or a pioneer zone. I believe that we should approach it with excitement, with gratitude, with energy, not feeling like victims, not sitting around complaining. I read hundreds of articles a day pointing out the hypocrisy of mainstream media, and I immediately at every time say, okay, that's how many times do we need to write that? How many articles do we need to know that? This is a known fact. It's simple. It's simply a fact. For people that are aware of it, okay, that's the fact of the matter. What is required now is what to be done about it. And there's a lot of people who are doing a lot about it. And there's a lot of good media and good journalism arising in the crevices and emerging to thanks to the highly popular to the tens of millions of people who seek an America that's honest and fair. Um, so that a lot of these new media are doing well. So I say, I say, let's have at it. Let's get at it. Let's keep at it. Let's build these things up. Let's populate them. Let's fund them. Let's what's the word? I forget. Not fund them. I'm not a funder, but support them financially, buy their ads, subscribe, and so on and so forth. Let's get this show on the road. The constant identifying of the rank hypocrisy in the mainstream media is no longer really a good use of time, I believe. But the main point I wish to make and what I want to introduce here, and why I've entitled this podcast Truth, Communication, and the Social Contract, is that now that we are put in a position because we don't know who to trust, who is willing to simply say facts as they are. I don't need anybody's ideology informing me. I will seek my ideology from roots independently of information. I happen to be a religious person or spiritual person. I seek my ideology from the roots of what is at the deepest level, at the cosmic level, and therein lies truth. And so I need to have access to some set of principles or some guiding intuition or energy, or I need grace in order for me to identify uh, what is true. And so now that we're forced into the beginning of reviewing an entirely new set of media, with tens of new media that we need something from within ourselves over against which to be able to resonate or identify or feel or sense what is being true and what's being presented without ideological bias. So if somebody says, this or that senator said this, and we're surrounded by media that lie, that outright lie, then where who am I going to identify as that when this outlet says this or that senator said this, that they're not, in fact, lying the way mainstream media constantly does, prevent outright falsehoods and misdirected quote unquote information to deliberately create false impressions of what has been done. So, what am I using as I'm rebuilding my particular media um, team, or who do I read? What do I read? What do I trust? And so, what I, there's a lot I need to speak about on this here, but I'm going to introduce just 2 points, the second of which has 4 elements, but don't worry, this isn't going to get long. First point is that I commend that some form of regimen that is at least spiritually oriented, or at least that has some element of either meditation or study or scripture or even full-blown religious practice. Go to church twice a week, join a church, whatever it is. I believe that our ability to increase and hone our capacity to recognize what's true does not come from swimming in the information and making a decision about each and every single one of those things. I have to be involved in a regimen that is creating in me and of me an individual capable of recognizing fair, honest, sincere, direct, and accurate information. The information itself does not have that with it. So ABC News says, picks half of 2 separate sentences spoken 30 minutes apart and says, and shows me a video. Trump said this today, that and that, said 30 minutes apart, taken entirely out of context, intended entirely to misdirect my understanding of what in fact was said. What do I have to rely on? The information itself will not tell me if it's true or false. Or if another media outlet that's fair and honest and dedicated to true facts, let the facts land where they may, whether it supports a preference or not, just say it as it is. What that information does not carry its own truth in and of itself. So that means that I myself have to have some place, like the gym. Where do I go to build up the muscle whereby I can see that ABC is deliberately misleading me, even though they're presenting something like facts, something like truth, usually half truth, or or an outlet that is basically trying to help me have a grasp of what in fact happened and trusting me to forge an opinion about it, whether it agrees with the writer's preferences or not. what where do I go to build up the capacity to recognize what's being presented to me as honest and fair and true? So the first point I want to make, and why I'm making this podcast, is to commend to those of us burdened with enough sense to recognize that we should be burdened with the task of rebuilding an entirely new collection of media and information outlets, as well as communications platforms, that that I commend that each of us find some path that is something like religious or spiritual, or in fact religious or spiritual, or something away from the flow and swim of information, in which we are developing the capacity to recognize the quality of information and developing the capacity to be advised from within whether or not what we are hearing is accurate and true. not from the information itself. It's not available in the information itself. We need a gym, somewhere to build up the muscles to be good at what we're doing. And if one of the things that we're doing in order to be active in our pursuits is taking in information about what's going on in the world, in order to be good at what we're doing, we have to have the capacity from within to know when what is being presented us is accurate, fair, honest, and true. All right. So that's part one. Part one. A separate thing, independent of the constant consumption of news and the constant sharing on social media of things that excite us. Independent of that, to get away from that and work in the gym, on your knees in prayer, in the Bible, in the Gita, wherever it is, whoever it is, with this guru or that priest or pastor, to help me become a person who can recognize and know when I'm being lied to, whether it's on TV or whether it's straight up at the Thanksgiving dinner table. I need those capacities in order to function well as an activist in a dangerous time in our society. Okay, that's that. Now, the second thing I wanted to present, and again, this is going to be highly abbreviated. I wish I could develop it more fully, but I don't want to take up a lot of our time. Um, this I got while sleeping. I ended up spending all night involved in dreamland, laboring through sheaths and reams of everything in that exists and categorizing it. And these were the categories I got, and this is what I'd like to offer as possible ways for us, as we have this burden and task, to build up which media we are going to be related to and which platforms on which we intend to communicate. The categories are these: true, false, dangerous, and ill-intended. True, false, dangerous, and ill-intended. I believe that having these four categories about anything said to you will be helpful in the labor of rebuilding our trusted media sources. So take any media source that's giving me a piece of information. Mitch McConnell said this. Justice Barr did this, or not. What is he? Not Justice. Uh, the retiring DOJ head of DOJ. Barr did this. That piece of information, I believe, will fall into any of four categories. If I hear it and as it's presented, what I get from it is close to the fact of the matter, then it's true. If it's far from or contrary to the fact of the matter, it's false. If me adopting that as a ground for my action that will bring about a deleterious outcome, it's dangerous. It's not just false, it's dangerous. And finally, an independent category is, did the person who communicated a quote unquote fact to me in such a way that they are deliberately trying to have me act in a realm of falsehood, then that is ill intended. Each of these four categories are distinct, and I'd like to develop them later. And again, because I don't want to overindulge your patience while listening to me. Something that's true is helpful on its face. It's it I can, it's helpful on its face. Something that's false is not evil. It's just plain wrong. It just needs to be corrected. There's nothing problematic with it other than it's an error. It's wrong. It's just wrong. It's not that problematic. All it needs to do is to say, wait, are you sure that he said it? Well, let me go look. Oh no, he didn't say it exactly like that. Thank you very much. You've corrected something that was simply false. Dangerous is a type of information in which you are moving someone to act on a presumption of information that actually does them harm. So, for example, a piece of information that is harmful is you can't really know whether drugs are good or bad unless you actually indulge in recreational use of drugs. That's a position. It's stated as information. It's stated as a fact, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous information. You could kill people and you could destroy lives. It's not just wrong, it's dangerous. These are two separate things. And finally, if there are people who are deliberately misleading me, us, that is ill intended. And therein lies the most criminal of all four relationships with fact and information. And so that's why I've labeled this podcast Truth, Communication, and the Social Contract. We have to know, we have to know where in these four categories each datum, each piece of information lies. Something being simply false is not criminal. It's just false. All it needs to do is be corrected. Something that is dangerous should set up red flags, and something that is ill-intended should be jailed, blocked, and it's stopped in all ways that are legal. Okay, so thanks for listening. I think this is. Thanks for listening. I've said what I said. We need something apart from the flow of information to build up our capacity to recognize what's true. And there's four categories. When you hear information, we need to recognize what we're hearing. It's extremely important, that second part, and the application of these four categories when we take in news, media, information, shared information on communications platforms, and so forth. I'll stop. Thank you very much. I'll be with you again soon.